Welcome back to Red May. I am with Eric Muller, my coach, and owner of Soul Experience Running Store in Osprey Village, Pitt Meadows, just down on Fraser Street. Uh, Welcome, Eric. Thanks for coming back
Yeah.
and sharing your experience and knowledge with us. Really appreciate that.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for inviting me.
You are welcome. And so today we are going to talk about training in the heat. I know it cooled down today. If you're in the lower mainland, it started raining, but it's still pretty warm outside. We did have a little bit of a heat wave over the weekend, and some people are definitely feeling that. So, Eric, I just want to pick your brain on a few things that might help us prepare for the heat the next time that it comes, because obviously summer's around the corner. The weather is going to get warm again. So what can we do to prep?
Yeah. It's for sure. There's a bit of a list of things we should be mindful of. But like you said at the beginning there, that's how this one kind of snuck up on us. But I like to remind our groups, especially, that where we live in this part of the world, we have what I think most people refer to as seasons. And so we're coming into that. So I know I'm doing a joke. We're coming into a summer season. So it's like it snuck up on us, and yet this is a pattern, right? It gets warmer at this time of year. But for some reason, sometimes runners maybe, I guess because we all get used to doing whatever it is we mostly do. And so you get used to running your certain route, you're used to running a certain pace. But with the heat, a big thing is slowing down. So if you can slow down and be ready to slow down, so expect to have to adjust how long your route will take, the pace per kilometer you'll have to run. So adjust those expectations, I think, is very important before you're even heading out the door.
So you might be out in the sun for the same amount of time, but essentially you're saying like shorten the route a little bit, because your 40-minute run, instead of being 6K, it might be 5K or something like that. Or if it's longer, you're going to shorten.
Or if you're going to run that same distance, expect it to take longer.
Right.
Slow it down.
So one in the same.
Bring it down a little bit. So your body has to now. It has to regulate. It has to cool you have to cool yourself. Those systems are now working harder to get that the cooling effect on your body. So you're perspiring. That requires more from your systems, and you're already running, which is also already stressing your system. So you're adding more stress when you're running in the heat.
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely feel more tired by the end of the day if you've been out in the heat. You just feel exhausted, right? So it definitely takes a lot more out of you when you're out there in the heat. And if you're trying to maintain that same pace that you've been doing before and you haven't acclimatized to it, it's a little bit of a wake-up call. You might actually, what could happen if I was out on the run and I was just, going a little bit too fast for my current adaptation to heat?
Yeah, well, you're gonna what's referred to in running, you could bonk. You could have a real it could be serious. You could have a real serious problem medically, but you're definitely going to see a difference and drop in performance. You're getting into that stage where you could be dehydrating. You could be having electrolyte imbalance could start happening. But I think even before we even get to that level, if you're running out actually, you still have to be mindful of that. But I think way before that, you might not even enjoy your run as much. And I think that's a shame, because it's a nice, beautiful day. You can still enjoy your run and without being worried about getting into a dangerous situation. Right? So I think it's still important to take some precautions ahead of time, which we'll kind of a bit of a list here today. But not be so worried about it that you aren't able to go out and keep running. Because part of this,
I think it kind of brings us to one of your next points. I know you were talking about earlier, before we got on, was that when you are changing your plans for your route, that you can actually plan to be in a little bit more shade rather than being exposed. So do you want to touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, I know it seems obvious when you kind of say it out loud that you can find a place where there's more shade. But you might not even realize a route that you take in a certain time of day. You might get exposure, you might get sun from one side of the road, and if you go different time of the day, it's in the shade, right? So you might not ever been aware of this before, especially if you're kind of new to running. But I know the routes I use. I'll just pick the time of day. As if I'm going to go on the dike in that direction, if I'm heading west, I'll probably want to do that in the evening, because the trees will be on my left, or whatever it is. Takes a little bit of trial and error. You might have to kind of be paying attention to where you're running a little more. where we are here at the shop in Osprey Village, we've got the nice treed path along the river path, which is in shade pretty much the entire way. So picking routes like that make a big difference, even in, if you need to run in the heat.
It's something you alluded to while you're talking about planning your route. You also talked about the time of day, and so there is going to be a peak heat during the day, right? And that's probably around 3 or 4 o'clock typically. So if you don't have any choice but to run at that time, you can still do it. But I think you're talking about adjust your expectations, adjust your speed, maybe adjust where you're going to be running. But if you can run at different times, what would you recommend?
Oh, well, obviously morning is, I shouldn't say obviously, morning is probably the best for most people. But you got to be early enough where you're kind of paying attention to when the temperature starts to rise. So you might have to adjust everything the night before to be able to run early in the morning. So that takes a little bit of planning, right? You can't just decide first thing in the morning, because everything else kind of starts to shift or adjust, right? If you bumps everything else you have to do that day. So yeah, it takes a little bit of pre-planning the night before if you're going to run early. Obviously, you can run in the evening when the sun starts to go down. I find though that evening runs, it can stay warm quite late, especially we get further into later in the spring and early summer. The heat lasts a little longer through later in the day.
Yeah, and I think sometimes too, if you're like running on a surface like the asphalt, the heat not only stays in there, but it almost like it radiates off, and so you get the heat coming down and then the heat coming back up, and that heats you up pretty quickly.
Yeah, finding a route that's a treed route is obviously lots of trees, definitely a help there. But then, of course, another thing on the list is regular sun protection that you would do on a regular basis when you're outside. So things like a hat, sunscreen, appropriate clothing that's vents very well. That's typically a little bit more maybe relaxed is definitely going to make a difference. Staying hydrated, so drinking enough water as you regularly do for regular bodily functions. You're going to have to increase that as the temperature goes up.
Okay, those are simple things to do, but
helpful to remind. Yeah.
You may not consider them though if you're just getting out, especially if you're just starting out and you've got your run apparel. This is what I wear for running, and that doesn't change regardless of the weather. Then of course sunscreen does make sense, and so for the most part, I think that there's a buffer zone there. If you're going out for 20 minutes, you might not need to throw on sunscreen, but if you're going out for an hour or more, I think that becomes a factor, because I think there's kind of, depending on what the UV index is typically over 40 minutes starts to get a little bit of an iffy territory, depending on what time of day that you're running at.
Yeah, for sure. And I know as someone who's got this hairstyle here, that unless I'm wearing a hat, when I go for a run, I'm wearing sunscreen. I wear sunscreen all year round. So I just need to be aware. So it's basically what I'm telling you is it's a habit that I've had to get into. So there's people like you've got, I don't know why you wear a hat so often. Especially right here inside. I always think that's sad. I should be had the one with the hat on. Anyway, when I'm outside, like this morning, I ran. This morning's a bad idea. It was pouring rain this morning when I ran. But so the day before yesterday, I'd say I'm either wearing a hat or I'm wearing sunscreen. So all year round. It's just, anyway, it's a healthy habit to get into. So staying hydrated. Yeah.
Quick question on the sunscreen. A concern that I have is probably a lot of other people do, is when you're out running, you're sweating and you get sweat in your eye. Now, how do you pick a certain brand, or is there something you look for in the sunscreen that you're applying above your eyes? Because I think that tends to be a concern. Even just like, I know if I don't have sunscreen on and I'm sweating by the end of a run, sometimes I'm getting, those droplets of sweat in my eye, and just from the electrolytes that I'm sweating out, like the salt, you do get that burning sensation. And same thing with sunscreen.
Yeah, you probably found too, the more hydrated you are, like you more water in your system, that's probably, you don't notice that as much. So things can get kind of concentrated when, you're maybe have less water on board. It can still happen though. And everybody's composition is a little bit different. It's going to be unique to you. I don't find sunscreen doesn't typically bother my eyes. But I do tend to go with the brands that are the sport brands. Like I usually do
Right.
the spray ones, and a lot of times they'll get the highest level, and I usually get the ones for kids. So ones that for children that they can wear, in the water because they're going to last a little longer.
Do you
Maybe
have a specific one that you would use or recommend? Not that this is a brand endorsement of
yeah,
any sorts, but just based on, like, if I'm going to look for
yeah,
sunscreen, I don't know what to look for other than those things. But I don't think every sunscreen is created equal when you say that as well.
that's true. I know I have Banana Boat, but to be honest, I have sunscreen in probably 3 different places, like in the car, in the downstairs washroom, and the upstairs washroom. Because I get to got to get the sunscreen on. I've got it in multiple places. So
Yeah.
a Banana Boat I know is kicking around the house. That's for sure.
And do you recommend the spray versus the cream,
Well,
or
I
what's?
like the spray because it's clear, and I don't have to worry about missing spots and big clump behind my ear or something weird like that. So no, I
Yeah,
don't
it's
know if there's that.
a bit of a tangent. I mean, I'm a big fan of the spray too because, hey, it goes on quick, and sometimes you may not apply it if you had to like rub it all in just based on how much
Yeah,
time you have allocated for a run.
right.
So even though it might not be, the better of the two, it's better because you actually put it on. So it's something to be
Absolutely.
said
Yeah,
for that.
yeah. And if you're worried about that, I mean, the hat is a way to go too, right? I don't have to worry about, especially on my head and shade my nose and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, to be honest, I will most definitely wear a hat when it's sunny outside and sunglasses as well, just to protect my eyes.
Right.
But I do have pretty salty sweat regardless of hydration levels, so
Yeah.
I'll often supplement salt if I'm doing a hot long run, depending on what kind of performance I'm expected to have out of that. But the hat helps not only wick the sweat from your head, but also just keep the sun out of your face and
Right.
protect you from the sun as well. So it's definitely a good tip to have.
Yeah. This is maybe not really for everybody, but just you talking about what works for you a little bit. I just because this running and it now got hot quickly and over the weekend. I play a little game with myself too. With I have to do the eyebrow squeegee because I don't have anything. Nothing else is absorbing right when I'm not wearing a hat. I'm just have sunscreen on. I play this little game with myself where I don't let. I'm aware that sunscreen and sweat's going in my eye, but I don't wipe it away. And this is kind of maybe a little silly story, but I did a lot of marathon canoe racing in my younger days, and you can't let go of your paddle and wipe sweat from your face. Like
No,
that,
how did
yeah, it
it?
messes up your
Right,
stroke. And I
right.
always race tandem, so there's always two of us, and so you can't. It really messes up your partner if you miss a stroke.
You're taking a
So
turn.
yeah, you can't. You just learn to be uncomfortable with it, and then actually I turn that around like I would with maybe wind, like when you're running in the wind. Um, I looked at that as a positive. So I looked at like, this is going to make me a little bit more resilient. It's going to make me a little bit stronger. It's going to make me a little bit more, well, I'm actually working hard enough where I'm actually sweating and somebody's going, that's positive. I'm out here working hard. So same with the wind. I always find with the wind, it's either cooling me off because I'm running into the wind or it's pushing me because it's at my back. It's only a positive.
It's helping you out. Yeah,
It's
in my
always helping
experience,
me out.
what's funny with the sweat in my eyes.
Yeah.
I can't speak for everyone, but it's really not until I finish my run that I'm like, oh, my eyes are burning. Versus when I'm actually running, I don't know whether that's just the wind because I'm running
Yeah.
so fast is pushing the sweat away from my eyes. But
You're like a windshield. You're going so fast, Steve, that your face is like the windshield of my car doing 80. It just
right,
runs
it
right
just
off the
beads, just
back.
beads. All right. So, do you have any tips other than running itself to help prepare yourself for the heat? And this is somewhere maybe where I can jump in a little bit because I've had some experience training for
Right.
events in the heat before.
Yeah.
But anything coming from yourself?
Yeah. Well, I would say just keep in mind that your body will adjust to this heat. It will adjust to heat, just as it adjusts to mileage. So I like to remind the people I'm coaching that when your body is doing something difficult, like running further and more often, it's gradual, and your body adapts and it makes adjustments. And it's quite amazing that pretty soon you're running further and more days, and you feel as good, if not better. So your body will adjust to the heat, but it is gradual. It like you said, it's in 2 days. It takes more than that. Just like if you went from running 5K and you wanted to run 12K, not a good idea to do over that. Don't expect to be able to do that over 2 days. Let your body adjust to this heat, and it will.
Yeah, and so just to speak to that, the time it takes, if you are committed to acclimatizing yourself to the heat, is going to be about a week. And so you have to have a streak of about a week where we've got some warm weather in order to make that acclimatization. Some things that you can help acclimatize yourself quicker is not necessarily just from running. There are opportunities to make yourself adapt quicker that is going to just make you uncomfortable in your daily life. But that is, for me, a minor inconvenience. Maybe I'm just a little bit sadistic because I'm able to get out and do the things I love and not have to worry about necessarily changing my whole plan on how I'm going to go about doing those things. So I'm talking about, like, if it's hot outside, instead of reading a book inside or doing your work inside, go in the shade outside. When you're driving around in your car, you can take your AC off and actually just kind of open your window, and that this will like help adaptation. Rather than running AC. I mean, this is for your whole family too. So they may not want to adapt to the heat like you do. You don't run AC in your home, and just have the window open, and all of these things, they're little things, but they'll help you adapt quicker versus like keeping yourself in a cool environment and then going out and going, oh my God, this is like stifling heat, and it just paralyzes you when you step out the door. Something I do to speed up my, and this will involve running, to speed up my adaptation, is actually going out in the peak heat during the day, keeping in mind what Eric's talking about with slowing down your pace and lessening your distance, is just to get out and train in that, peak heat at 3 or 4 p.m. And just kind of like, Eric's saying, with the sweat in your eyes, smile and enjoy it. Know what you're doing is actually helping you with your training moving forward. And it does serve a purpose, but you can't have the expectation that you're going to have your best run on that day.
Right. Yeah. No, that's good. That's a good point. It reminds me of my friend Bruce likes to tell the story about he was training for a marathon in Australia, but he had to. It was going to be warmer than it is in BC. He lives in Coquitlam, so he pulled his treadmill into the greenhouse. So
there you go. That might break the electronics, but it'll definitely create an adaptation.
Yeah, to get the adaptations. Yeah, that's true. That's kind of neat. Yeah. So I think, but just to kind of remind people that to first be safe and be careful, and be cautious, but not to let the change in our environment, the change in seasons, paralyze you or keep you from getting out there. And even if you have to make it shorter or make it slower.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of people say, I don't like running in the heat, or I can't run in the heat. Yeah. It just takes a little bit. So if you go out and you experience it the one time and you have a bad taste in your mouth based on how you expected that run to go from your previous performances when the weather it's a little bit more moderate, you just have to, like Eric was saying, adjust your expectations from that, and then continue to stay the course, and your body will adapt in time.
Yeah, right on.
All right, well, thanks for your time today, Eric. I look forward to talking to you next time.
All right, thanks, Steve.
Take care, guys.